Hello there, everyone. Hope everyone is having a good evening on this Friday, February. What is today? February the 16th. 16th. Wow. All right. So, thank you all for joining me. Let's get on camera. There we go. And let me just, before we get started, I think I have a cool story for you tonight. But let me just say hello to everyone in the chat so far. Hello, Baywatcher. Hello, Gina. How you doing, Adam? Kelly, good to see you. Paul, good to see you. Paul C. Do in the house. Great to see you. Keeping you up, but I'm glad you're here. Mike F. checking in from Oklahoma. Arm distance. How are you doing? Good to see you. Did I miss anyone? I hope I did not. I don't want to miss anyone. Kelly, I said hello to Stefano. Good to see you. Monita, good to see you. TT's checking in. Said she'll be listening. Very cool. Tommy Stiggs wishing us a good show. Excellent. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it, as always. Hello, Stephen. How you doing? Now, before we got to do anything, we got to get our candles lit, right? What would it be without candles lit? We need to do that. There's one. There's two. We'll shut that light off. We don't need that light. And I have my libation here, as I always do, for a Friday night. So glad you guys could join me. Tonight's ghost story is, if I might say so, pretty cool. And I'm going to hop right into it. But before I do that, I want to give you a little bit of historical context. And usually my ghost stories are historical. So we'll start off with that. This ghost story takes place in the Niagara, the Fort Niagara area, which is right on Lake Ontario in Youngstown, New York. So it's not far from our friends in Buffalo there, Thendu and Todd Father. They might be familiar with it. And but there's a big fort there. And I will actually show you a picture of the fort, which I think it's important to see that because it'll give the feel of the story if you understand what I'm talking about here. So let me just share my screen real quick. See if I can, there we go. This is a picture of Fort Niagara. And as you can see, it's very old. And it was first built by the French in actually the 1600s as a fur trading post. But eventually was built into what you're seeing right here, which I think was built in 1726 or 28, sometime around there. So that's what we're talking about, right? And our story is going to take place right here at this fort. Around the year 1740 is when it's going to take place. So let me stop sharing so you can see me. Here we go. Now, at this time, the French controlled all of this region. This was a French colony, that area around there. It wasn't until after the French and Indian War, or as they called in Europe, the 7 Years' War, that the British took it over. But before that, it was solidly French, all based on the fur trades. And there were several Indian tribes, American Indian tribes in the area, mostly the Iroquois. The Iroquois Confederacy was the tribes that were in that area. And our story takes place, like I said, in 1740, sorry, excuse me. And the area around that, obviously that fort had a garrison of French troops that were stationed there. And a lot of these troops were young men, young, virile men, single, out for an adventure. That's why they were part of the army or part of the military, the French military. And at this time, there weren't many French settlers because the French were mostly most of their settlers, not all, but most of their settlers at the beginning were fur traders, not really families. So you didn't have a lot of French women being brought over and such. It wasn't until later that that started to happen. So it stands to reason that these soldiers that were there would tend to look towards the native population, mainly the Iroquois, and later on the Algonquin tribes, but look to them for female companionship. And our story is all about that, basically. And that's really the cause of the ultimate ghost that we're going to talk about. So, like I said, around 1740 is our story. And in and around the fort area, especially in the summer, many tribes would come and set up kind of like a community, set up their summer residence there. It was right on the lake, so it was cooler. They could fish, they could relax. And most of the tribes were transitory, so they would move around. And in the summer, this would be where they would go. This would be where they would trade, they would plant crops, and in times of peace, it wasn't really a fort. It was more like a town hall, a center of the town, so to speak, with the various tribes setting up around it. The inhabitants of the fort would then trade with the Indians and intermingle and so on. So in the summer of 1740, there were quite a few number of beautiful young Indian maidens. And quite a host of young soldiers looking to hook up with these maidens or at least impress them and show off to them, etc., etc. So, but there was one Indian maiden whose name was Orinda. Orinda. Now, Orinda, what that name meant was magical power. And it was said that she was so beautiful that she had magical power over men, that her beauty was so strong and that she was such an alluring creature that she could have power over the likes of any men. So, thus her name, or Orinda, and that's Iroquois for magical power. And so it stands to reason that there was a whole host of soldiers looking to gain her attention. In fact, there was a dozen of them at least that were doing that. And throughout the summer, they would try to win her. And it turns out that ultimately she had her choices down to two, and there were two French lieutenants, one by the name of Francois and one by the name of Pierre. But she really couldn't make up her mind. So there began this rival between the two, where each tried to impress her and each tried to impress her family in hopes to win her over. They would shower her with gifts. They would try to outdo each other. They would be putting on a show for her father in hopes that to gain the approval of the father, et cetera, et cetera. And this went on for a while between the two lieutenants until she made it clear that she had made her choice, that she preferred Francois. Francois was who she felt she loved. Well, obviously Francois was ecstatic, and Pierre at the same time was crushed by this. But Orinda's power was so alluring that Pierre swore that he was not going to give up. Even though she professed that her true love was for Francois, he would not give up the pursuit. And that's what leads ultimately to the problem. So, meanwhile, Francois, feeling he's won the day, he's won the hand of the beautiful maiden, begins to plan out his future as to what it would be like. How can he convince her to come and now that she's chosen him, to come and marry him and live at the fort and ultimately someday move back with him to France and be the mother of his children. So he begins a campaign to convince her and her family that she should go with him. Unfortunately, this was not that easy. The Iroquois were very distrustful of the French. They would trade with them, but they were distrustful. The Iroquois tended to be more aligned with the English. The English were more their allies. The French they didn't trust because of the French had deeper relations with the Algonquin people, who were the natural enemies of the Iroquois. So you have that conflict there. So thus it would be difficult for any Frenchman to try to win over an Iroquois maiden. So that was what Francois was faced with. So as he goes about this, he goes out throughout the summer in an effort to do this, to win her over. Now, meanwhile, Pierre had seemingly moved on, but had not. He began seeing another maiden in the tribal area there, who he was using for information, really. He really didn't love her. He was just seeing her in hopes that he can gain information and keep tabs on what Francois and Orinda were doing. And this maiden gave him some information about how Orinda was conflicted. She loved Francois, but did not want to move back with him. She did not want to leave her family. That was her big conflict. She did not want to leave her family and go back to France. She wanted to stay. She wanted Francois to stay with her and actually go with the tribe and be a member of the tribe. And for obviously, Francois was against this. So Pierre saw this as a perfect opportunity to disrupt things and get in. So one night, towards the end of the summer, now the end of the summer is an important time because the tribe would be getting ready to move its summer quarters into the woods for its winter quarters to find where it would be for the winter. So if things didn't happen soon, Francois would miss losing her. If she were to go, she would be gone, and who knows if she would ever return. So he had to move quickly. He had to convince her and her family quickly. Now, meanwhile, Pierre is doing the behind the scenes stuff to try to disrupt things and hopefully put himself in place and make him a better person, a better attractive option for Orinda. So one night, Francois, not Francois, Pierre sneaks away from the fort and visits Orinda and her family, unbeknownst to anyone else. And what he did was begin to tell the family on how he would swear to stay with Orinda if she would choose him. That Francois was dead set against this. Francois would steal their daughter away and they'd never see her again. But if she would just change her likings, change her feelings, find her true feelings, as he put it, he would stay with the tribe, become a member, and they would live happily ever after. So that gave Orinda's father something to think about, and mother, and something to think about here. Now, so after doing his pitch, he left for the night, left and took off. And on the way back to the fort, he stops at a trader's post, a camp of a bunch of fur traders who were celebrating that they all of the furs they had captured and the money they were going to make, and they were imbibing on French wine to celebrate this. So he partakes with them, sits at the campfire and begins to drink and tell the stories of what happened and what he's doing and how he's going to marry this Indian girl. He's perfectly confident that he's going to marry her, that he's convinced the family and he's going to marry her. Now, meanwhile, as he left, after he left, Francois had also snuck out from the fort for one last try to convince Orinda to come back with him to the fort before the family left. Now, Orinda loved Francois. It's clear. That was her true love. So what she immediately did was tell Francois what Pierre had done. Pierre had come there. Now, Francois was enraged when he heard this. He heard what Pierre was trying to do. And he stormed off and made his way back to the fort, bent on getting revenge against Pierre. And on the way back, he stops at a trader's cabin who he happens to know, the family. And they invite him in, and they feed him, and they also are drinking and celebrating. Now, what they were celebrating, I don't know. But anyway, Francois was drinking way too much that night himself. So he ties a good one on. And it's late that night that he stumbles back to the fort. Now, fate would have it at the same time, Pierre stumbled back in a similar drunken condition from the fur traders' camp. And the two meet and the front of what they call the castle. The castle is the fort. As you can see, as the picture, you saw the picture, it looked like, it's kind of looks like a castle. So the nickname for the fort at the time was called the castle. There it is. I'll show you real quick. There it is again. And it's right in front of there that the two meet in a dark night, a dark moonless night, they meet. And as they meet, they're both pretty intoxicated and pretty angry with each other. And words are exchanged. And Pierre and Francois accuses Pierre of being a backstabber, of being a snake. And Pierre screams it out in the night that he truly loves Orinda and that he will get her. She will be her. And as the tensions escalate, it gets to the point where swords are drawn. Now, the two lieutenants were very good swordsmen. They were both trained very well in France on how to fence and to fight with the sword. It was part of the basic training of a young lieutenant. So they were pretty well matched. But, however, they were very, very drunk at the time, stumbling, thrusting and missing, parrying and missing a parrying, and one falling over the other, and vice versa. And each time they missed, they got even angrier and angrier as they couldn't defeat their opponent. Now, if they weren't drunk, chances are things would have ended at a draw because they were both evenly matched. But it just so happens that Pierre had a little bit more to drink that night with the fur traders and had a little less control of his motor skills. And as a result, whether it be luck or whether it be skill, Francois lunged forward and hit a killing blow right into his heart. And at that point, Pierre dropped dead right there in front of him. Now, under the torchlight of the fort, there wasn't much people could see. You know, it was late at night. There was very few people around. In fact, only a sentry was on a guard post far enough away that they didn't notice what had been going on. It had been quite a quiet fight, I guess, because it was just the two of them. And so Francois found himself in front of a dead body. Now, unfortunately, for Francois's situation, he was so enraged and so angry that he decided to continue, not knowing necessarily that he was dead. He knew that he fell to the ground. Didn't necessarily know that it was a killing blow because, again, he was drunk as well, but began to slash and hack at him to the point where he was so angry that he hacked at the body to the point that he cut the head off of Pierre. So there laid the body and the head of Pierre. Well, Francois, still in this fit of rage, picks up the head, runs towards the river that ran alongside the fort, and threw the head into the river, such that the flow of the river took the head well into Lake Ontario, to never be found or seen again. Now, Francois stumbled back to the point where he did the deed originally and is set with, obviously, a body that he can't move. It's too heavy. He can't do much with it. He can't do the same thing he did with the head. But as he's starting to come out of the rage a little bit, he realizes he has to do something. Otherwise, the gallows will be waiting for him. If they find out that this happened, he is dead. They will execute him, court-martial, and execute him. So without much thought or much options in front of him, he decides to take the body into the fort entrance and dump it into a well. There was a well at the fort entrance inside and take the lid off the well and dump the body into the well. In fact, that well is still there today. And if you take a tour of it, you'll see the well on the entrance once you go in. And let me see. I thought I found a picture of it. I'd like to show you a picture of what the well looked like. Here it is. This is what the well looked like. Now, you see the picture there in the back, but the well has like a grate on it. He took the grate off and then begrudgingly shoved the body into the well, and it went flying down into and hit the water at the bottom. And he put the grate on top once again, and then pulled away in hopes that he would cover his tracks as to what he did. Now, there was quite a bit of blood to be found, but he was able to go to the river and wash it off himself, so that he had no blood on him. And when he returned to his barracks, he quickly put away his sword, cleaned his sword, so that there was no obvious evidence of this and what had happened. Now, it goes to reason that people were going to say, whatever happened to Pierre? Whatever happened to Pierre? And the fact that there was blood on the ground outside the front of the fortress meant that there was bound to be some interest into what's going on. So the next couple of days go by, and people notice, where's Francois? I mean, where is Pierre? Pierre has not shown up for roll call. Roll call. He's AWOL, as they would say. And people begin to ask questions, and people begin to understand and want to know from Francois what he knows about Pierre, because the major recalls not too long ago where he had to split the two of them up, where they were about to come to blows, and the major had to step in between them and stop them. So it's obvious that Francois is the main suspect here. Well, Francois plays dumb, so to speak, but knows that his time is limited. It's only a matter of time before someone finds the body in the well. And at that point, they're going to understand it's going to fall on him. So that night, he decides to make his escape, and he flees from the fort to get back to Ornida. And he's decided he has no choice. At this point, he can't go back to France. He's got to go with Ornida, join the tribe, and leave with them into the woods. That's his only chance for doing so. And he does just that. Now, remember, Ornida knew nothing about whatever happened to Pierre, only that she loved Francois, and Francois was there. Now Francois is successful in marrying her, and he disappears into the wilderness with the tribe as they leave for the winter. Now, back at the fort, the body is eventually discovered, and it's understood that Francois is the main culprit here, or it's believed that he's the main culprit, but they can't find him. And it's only right after that, when things start to happen around the fort, which becomes the ghost part of the story, because it's not very uncommon for very traumatic and evil events like that to echo on through time, and spirits tend to linger. And it became obvious to the residents of that fort that something was wrong, in that Pierre's ghost was still there. And in fact, many saw him, a headless version of him, wandering in front of the fort in an endless quest for his head. Because his head, remember, is long gone. His head is in Lake Ontario somewhere. But the ghost lingers on. And it's the sightings of this ghost that eventually brought people to the well to find the body. And now, unfortunately, nothing was ever heard of about Francois again. So theoretically, he got away with murder and went off to become a native and join the Iroquois and become one of them. But he was the ghost of Pierre, however, continued to haunt that particular fort for hundreds of years. In fact, even today, and times, people will say that on a dark night, a dark and moonless night, in front of the torches of that fort, if they're lit, you could see the silhouette of the duel with the two men fighting to the death, and to the point where you see the head go flying off, and then it vanishes. And then not long after, you will see, coming from the distance, the walking headless body of Pierre, looking aimlessly for his head on the grounds of Fort Niagara. So that's the story, folks. That's the ghost story to this day. Um, he Francois, the evil one, vanishes, and poor Pierre. I mean, Pierre was no sweetie either. Let's put it that way, because Pierre was being the snake, the backstabbing snake, so to speak. But his ghost is said to still haunt Fort Niagara, and if you ever have a chance to go there, you might want to check out that well and see what you see. Some people say they see a skeleton down there. If they look hard enough, they see a skeleton. Others say they have seen the headless ghost wandering around at night. Some claim they've seen the duel reenacting time and time again in front of the fortress. So who knows? Anything is certainly possible. So that's my story. The ghostly duel of Fort Niagara, which took place almost 300 years ago. So, yeah. So, hello, everyone. And those that I haven't said hello to, Bobo, good to see you. Don McHugh. Carmela's in the house. Good to see you. Thank you for joining, guys. Really appreciate it. Anyone else that I miss? If I do, I apologize, but I want to just say hello to everyone. So, I don't know. What did you think of that story? I thought it was pretty cool. I like historical stories like that. That's based on a legend. It's because you can go there and who knows, you can probably see something. Who knows? The drunken duel, Carmel, you're right. They were drunk, exactly. In fact, if they weren't drunk, who knows? They probably would have not killed it. One of them probably would have not gotten killed. They probably would have ended at a draw. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Bobo. And Don, thank you, guys. Arms, thank you. Appreciate it. So one of these days, hopefully, I'll make a trip up there, and maybe I could see Thindu and Todd Father, and I'll check this out firsthand. I'll go to Fort Niagara and see if I can encounter Pierre's ghost, or at least his body, not his head. But yeah. You know what, Bobo? That's a good question. It always, that's a good point. It does often come down to a woman or vying for a woman. Let's put it that way. Just like if you go back when you're interested, look at one of my Baron, the Baron, what was his name? Ghost Ship. Look at that one. That was all about a woman too. Yeah, you got to be careful there, guys. Got to be careful with them women. Them women can do you in. Carmela says, knock it off, Bobo. Yeah, Carmela, you remember that one? Yeah, that was pretty cool, that one. Yeah, so I know Tommy wanted me to do the white lady story. But I'll do it. I'll get to it. I'll do that. It's not much to that story, though, as far as I know. I'll research it and see if I can find out more, but I don't think there's much to that. But I'll try and see what I can find out. Thank you, Bobo. Yeah, I try. I try to pick a story that's interesting. I don't want to just throw random, stories out. They got to have some type of kick to them, right, to make them interesting. And I think these do. This has the historical context. It has the duel. It has the love of a woman involved. It has all these very dramatic, emotional elements that make it interesting. So that's really it, guys, for tonight. I really appreciate you being here. Any questions for me? I'm always here to answer them. I'm always happy to answer them. And like I said, if anyone has a story or a legend that they've heard and you want me to research it and tell it, I'd be happy to. Just let me know. Because, sometimes I rack my brains looking for interesting ones to come up with. So I'd be happy to do that. Hansel and Gretel. Yeah, you know what, Carmela? I'm working on Snow White. Snow White's going to be my next fairy tale that I'm going to put up. You'd be surprised how long those things take. Those audiobook things take. They take a long time to put together because not only do you have to get the audio correct, you have to also find the pictures on the internet to accompany it. And then you got to meld it together. You got to put it all together. So it takes quite a while. So I've done about, I would say about a third of it, and hopefully I'll complete it. I want to complete it this weekend, and hopefully we'll get it up. It's not spooky. Well, I guess it is. It could be spooky, Don. Think about it. The Wicked Witch, the evil witch, she's kind of spooky. She's certainly evil. The Wicked Queen. So that could be spooky, and that's the fairy tale part. The fairy tales aren't always spooky. Fairy tales are fairy tales, and and I like the original version of the fairy tales. the the original Grimm brothers versions, which are when you read them, and that's what I use. I use the text of the original. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit. It's not your run of the mill story always, because a lot of times the running version of it, which is used most often, is watered down, and it's not as harsh as the original tales. Yes, Red Riding Hood. Yes, I did Red Riding Hood. Yep. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the audiobooks, they take a bit of effort because you got to make sure you get the pronunciation right, and then you make errors, and you got to go back and you have to do it again. And I'm not like in a studio where it's perfect, so it takes a while to get them done. Three Little Pigs. Well, Three Little Pigs is not a Grimm's brothers tale. I don't even know where that comes. Maybe that's Aesop. I don't know. I don't know. Yes, the wolf. Yeah, I mean, well, and what is the backstory behind Little Red Riding Hood, right? What's the backstory there? It's warning women, I guess, warning girls of the wolf. The wolf being men out to get them, so to speak. Little Red Riding Hood set them up with the wolf. That's a good one, Bobo. So we're supposed to get some snow here overnight. I don't know, 3 inches, something like that. So it looks like we're having a real winter this year. Last year we didn't really have much of a winter. I don't remember any snow last year. I think we had a dusting. That was it last year. But we got some snow now. And before you know it, it'll be planting season come April. You get the garden going. So good stuff to look forward to. But in the meantime, we have our stories to tell. We have The Godfather happening on Sunday. This is the concluding scene of Godfather 2, which will be cool. SPK, good to see you. How are you? 3-day weekend, you're right. Freddie is no longer limping, I'm happy to say, Carmela. I saw him, and I put up a video, I don't know, last week. He was walking normal. So he took him a while, but he looks like he has healed. So I'm happy to see that. Yeah, so Godfather concluding scene on Sunday at 2. Wine tasting. I'm going to start my wine tastings up again on Thursday. So good stuff happening. Arugula, tomato, basil, eggplants. Yes. Don't forget zucchini. I love my zucchini. I make a great zucchini and gorgonzola soup. It's amazing. And I made that with my zucchini last year. Zucchini and squash. Lots of good stuff. Arugula. Yeah, I didn't grow arugula. I had just regular lettuce. I had what did I have last year? I think romaine lettuce. I think I grew. But who knows? We could have new. We could have new. I just made butternut squash soup from my butternut squash from last season that I kept. I had a bunch that I kept in the basement, and I just made them last weekend. So they were still good. Still good. It's getting to the point where they get kind of dried out and they lose some of the flavor. But good stuff. See no evil, my friend. How are you? Good to see you. Do you batter up the? I don't batter up. I know people eat them, the zucchini flowers. Yeah, I know people eat them, Bobo. I don't. I've never done that, but I know they do. Joey Pope is here. How are you, my friend? I didn't see you here. There you are. Yeah, Carmela and Stiggs doing their play-by-play of that book, which I've never read. I've never read that book. So, uh, yeah, they do a good job of breaking that down. That book. Hey, Dave from Boston. Good to see you. Everybody's checking in. This is awesome. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Hey, Cinnamon. Good to see you. Yeah, they are a good team. I agree. They're definitely a good team when it comes to that book. Absolutely. In the same vein of those books, I do the audio book of Jersey Boys, the Boys from New Jersey. I'm sorry, the Boys from New Jersey, and I haven't done that yet. I haven't continued that. I did the first two chapters. I got to do the third chapter and so on. But that's another thing that takes a while to do because of all the mistakes you make. You got to make sure you do it the right way, etc. See no evil. That's what I do with. Yeah, I do that with the boys from the boys from Jersey, boys from New Jersey. Where's that book? But I'm doing it chapter by chapter. It's just too much to do all at once. It's a pretty big book, so I'm doing it. So I have to get to chapter 3 and put that up. So thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. Yeah, so it's a quiet evening here, but everyone is checking in. That's great. 20 people. Thank you, guys. Bobo says Carmela uses a voice changer. Really? Oh, see, no, you mean for download? Okay, yeah. No, I know. I've never looked into doing that. I don't know. So, yeah. So that's my story for this evening. The duel, the ghostly duel of Fort Niagara. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys joining now, please go back and take a look at it, listen to it. I think it's a cool story. It'll hold your attention for a little bit. Oh yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, press the like button. Let's see what that does. I mean, we got 23 people in chat. That's amazing. I never get this many people for a ghost story. So thank you guys. I appreciate that. um well, I've only been doing them on here. I don't know how many I don't know how many. When am I doing them? Maybe 6 months. I don't. Not even 6 months. But I've always been interested in ghost stories, Bobo. I've always found it very interesting, and I'm a history. I'm a student of history. I love history, and there's a link there, and it intrigues me. Legends, ghost stories. Just I find it fascinating. So I collect them, so to speak, and when I find them, I try to gather the information. So I thought it would be a good thing to share in the form of a video for you guys. Oh, see no evil. The prince is not like the prince is like a textbook. It would be very difficult to do. Uh, it's. I mean, I could do it. That's not a problem. I could certainly do it. It's I have the English version of it, obviously, so I could do that. But I don't know how interesting it would be to listen to, because it's basically a how-to book for the prince to use. So it's instructional. It's like kind of reading a manual, reading a how-to manual. Well, thank you, Carmela, for being here. I really appreciate that. You're welcome. Anytime, anytime. Water that palm tree. Would be interesting to learn about. Oh, okay. So evil. Listen, that's no, that's a fair topic. That's a good topic to learn. We talk about the prince a lot on the Godfather shows, because most of the traditional organized Cosa Nostra was based on Prince Machiavellian principles that were in the Prince. So we talk about it a lot. But yeah, that would be interesting. Maybe I can do something like that to break down the Prince and really get into the tenets of it. There's a lot of stuff in there, though. A lot of stuff. Yeah. So anyway, guys, I appreciate it as always. You guys joining me and hanging out, being courteous and kind to each other. That's awesome. We don't need trolls here, thankfully. We don't get them. Hopefully, keep the fingers crossed. We don't need them. But I really appreciate each and every one of you for hanging out and contributing. And I hope that I entertain you a little bit and pique your curiosity into these things, into history, into legends and ghostly tales. So, with that, I'm going to say hit the like button if you can on the way out. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. We're monetized. I'm monetized finally. So, you'll see ads, I guess, at the beginning. I really haven't looked to see how it works, but that's what I wanted to achieve, and I did it. So I'm pretty happy about that. And we'll see where we go from here. I'll continue to do these things as long as you guys like them and want to hear them. I'm not going to talk to myself. Got to talk to somebody. So thank you so much. And I will say, as always, build the guild, and God bless, and stay scared as I blow out my candles, and see you next time on the guild. Trick candle.